He and his brother have done more than anybody to fund climate science deniers for decades, so fuck him. The Amazon is burning up. I'm glad he's dead.
Today I want to talk about why I think the left hates the Super Koch brothers. Because as you just saw, many people are celebrating the death of David Koch. May he rest in peace. And I know that David has been active in politics, and I know that the Super Koch brothers are notorious for their political activism, but I think that this is deeper than politics. So I'm going to start with number one, which I think is pretty obvious. The fact that the Super Koch brothers are wealthy, accomplished businessmen. The left hates wealthy, accomplished businessmen. And you can even see this today with Boss Bezos, the founder of Amazon, worth well over $100 billion, at least he was before his divorce. But the left hates Boss Bezos, and Boss Bezos is not that politically active. He's not, at least not nearly as much as the Koch brothers. He's not funding think tanks or anything. He may chime in every once in a while. But other than that, Boss Bezos really is not notorious for his political views. Hell, just look at AOC's policy advisor, who says that every billionaire is a policy failure. So the mere fact that the Super Koch brothers exist and have billions of dollars, that fact alone makes them a villain, makes them villains in the left's eyes. So their political views are pretty irrelevant, because even if they were apolitical, even if they never gave a rat's ass about who's in office, they would be villains. And this brings me to the second reason, the fact that the Super Koch brothers were born into privilege. That's right, the Super Koch brothers inherited tens of millions of dollars in the 1960s, along with an oil company that was established by their father, Fred Koch. Charles Koch, who is still alive, thank goodness, took over the reins of the company, and at the time it was worth around $50 million, had 600 employees, was turning about $30 to $35 million in revenue. I'm going off the top of my head here from stuff I've read in the book Sons of Wichita, which I highly recommend. So, $50 million oil company, $35 million in revenue, 600 employees. Now that company is worth over $100 billion, brings over $100 billion a year in revenue, and has over 100,000 employees. That's how successful this company has been under the Koch brothers' watch. And I know some people would be like,
oh, well, it's easy to turn that much money when you have advantages and privilege.
But turning a $50 million company into $100 billion, just for comparison, that would be like inheriting $1,000 and turning that into $2 million over the span of 3 to 4 decades, which, if you're able to do that, I say good for you. You should probably take up a career in investment, because you clearly know how to efficiently allocate capital. And I know that many on the left pretend like this is a big deal, like,
oh, well, they had a head start.
But really, it's not a big deal at all. They don't give a shit. Just look at Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie started off life poor, came to America as an immigrant, penniless, and he created hundreds of billions of dollars worth of wealth. And the left talks about him like he's Mr. Burns, like he's this big monster, that they call him a robber baron. Same with J.D. Rockefeller, grew up in poverty and created billions of dollars worth of wealth. Thomas Edison, who was selling newspapers on a train when he was a kid, and created millions, if not billions, of dollars worth of wealth, improved the standard of living. And people are demonizing Thomas Edison. They also have a very negative view of Sam Walton, even though he didn't really grow up with much privilege and advantage. So the fact that the Super Koch brothers were born with advantages and inherited millions of dollars, it's really irrelevant. It really doesn't matter. These people, these miserable morons, would hate the Super Koch brothers either way. But the fact that they grew up with privilege just makes them even worse. They say when life gives you lemons, just make lemonade. And some people start life with a lemon. Some people start life with a handful of lemon seeds. Some people start life with a basket of lemons. But the Super Koch brothers, they started life with a lemon tree. But they took that lemon tree and they made it into an entire lemon forest. Now they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of acres worth of lemon forest, of lemon trees growing. And they've amassed a lot of wealth. by selling these lemons and lemonade, and they used that money to buy some sugar mills and refineries. They also used that money to make some lemonade factories so they can make lemonade more efficiently. They paid Disney to draw some lemonade mascot with sunglasses and a backwards hat, which they have used to sell merchandise like movies and cartoons and video games. In other words, the Super Koch brothers have done very well with what they've been given. But as we all know, they were not given a lemon tree, they were given something else. Which brings me to point number 3, the fact that the Super Koch brothers have amassed their billions of dollars worth of wealth through selling oil and fossil fuel energy. Because I think at this point, big oil is enemy number 1. Maybe you can make a case for big banks. Maybe you could throw big pharma in there. Maybe big gun companies like Colt and Smith & Wesson. Maybe they're in the conversation. But I think given all of the hysteria over climate change, I think big oil companies, they're the biggest monsters of them all. And the way the left sees it, every dollar that the Super Koch brothers make is just one step closer to Armageddon. So for those keeping score at home, the Super Koch brothers were born into privilege. That's strike number 1. They've amassed billions of dollars, tens if not hundreds of billions of dollars worth of wealth. That's strike number 2. And the fact that they amassed this wealth largely through selling oil and fossil fuel energy, well, that's strike number 3. So let's move on to point number 4, which is the fact that the Super Koch brothers have been active for decades in opposing left-wing politics. And I might be overthinking this, but I can't help but wonder if this actually all started and began with the father, Fred Koch Sr. For those who don't know, Fred Koch Sr. was an insane anti-communist. He spent a lot of time and money and resources opposing communism in America. And it all started when Fred Koch Sr. went to the Soviet Union in the early 1930s. He went there to help, I think, build some oil refineries. He helped do some work with oil refineries while the Soviet Union was being ruled by Uncle Joseph Stalin's iron fist. Anyway, Fred Koch Sr., he went to the Soviet Union, he worked with the people, he traveled the country, and he saw how shitty communism was. According to Fred, people were giving him postcards and letters to take with him to the United States to send to their relatives, because they said that if they tried sending them through the mail in the Soviet Union, those letters and postcards, they might get read by the police, and, well, that's not going to be fun. Additionally, Fred Koch dealt with some communists and some party members in the Soviet Union who apparently were talking shit and making passive threats, talking about how wonderful communism's going and how they're coming for America next. I guess the day Fred Koch, his last day in the Soviet Union, someone told him that they can't wait to see him again and that they might be seeing him in America before he comes back to the Soviet Union. And I actually believe this because, as we know, Vladimir Lenin was writing letters to American workers and American unions when he was still alive, and the fact that the Soviet Union was funding propaganda in Hollywood. They were funding Hollywood studios and trade union magazines, at least according to that video I watched from Razor Fist, and he seemed to cite his sources, so it seemed legitimate to me. Either way, Fred Koch saw how shitty the Soviet Union was. His experience in the Soviet Union put the fear of Marx into him, and when he came back to the United States, he went a little insane with the anti-communism. As we know, Fred Koch Sr., he helped create the John Birch Society, which was created to oppose communism, and they definitely went a little too far at times. I think they called Dwight Eisenhower a communist. I think they said the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision, I think they said that was a communist conspiracy or some shit. I don't know. He sounded like the Alex Jones of his time, which is unfortunate because communism is worthy of condemnation and opposition, and when you get a little too crazy and don't check your premises, well, people stop taking you seriously. But I can't help but wonder if this is where the contempt and hatred for the Koch family began. Given that communists and Marxists were in American academia, and communist sympathizers were in the media with Walter Duranty and in Hollywood. Regardless, as we know, the Super Koch brothers have a history of funding think tanks that promote free markets and limited government and individual rights. The Super Koch brothers have a history of funding political campaigns on both sides of the political aisle. I guess they have a history of even funding Democrats. The Super Koch brothers are advocates for legalized abortion. They're in favor of more open immigration policies. They're in favor of same-sex marriage, criminal justice reform, ending the war on drugs, not getting into costly and unnecessary wars. They're against government surveillance. So I think this is why the left really hates the Super Koch brothers. Partly because they embody everything that the left hates, which is being born into privilege and creating massive amounts of wealth, which have improved the standards of living and lives for millions of Americans. And their main product, the main product that they've sold that has made them rich is oil and fossil fuel energy. And to add insult to injury, the Super Koch brothers make for very formidable political opponents. These guys are the best of the political opponents. These are political opponents that the left, quite frankly, can't compete with. Because the Super Koch brothers, they're not nationalist and they're not religious zealots, at least from what I've seen. They don't really seem to place much of a premium, if any premium at all, on religion. They seem pretty secular. I think the left loves getting down and dirty with nationalists to see who can be the bigger collectivist. And the same thing with the religious right. The left loves to get into a pissing match with the religious right to see who can be the bigger altruist. Hardcore right-wing Christians or radical socialists. The Super Koch brothers are advocates for great things like freedom and individualism and capitalism. And the only way the left can win against advocates for freedom and individualism and capitalism is one of two ways. Either the advocates shut the hell up, or the advocates merely stop existing. And this is why we see many people on the left celebrating the death of David Koch.